You're watching live now. I'm Austin Westfall. We are getting breaking news. We're hearing that there have been strikes with the U.S. and Iran. We're hearing that the U.S. has launched self-defense strikes. That is what they're saying.
CENTCOM saying the ships violated the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports, which has been squeezing Iran's economy to try and get the Iranian regime to make a deal. While Iran is again firing on civilian targets in the United Arab Emirates, UAE officials say its air defenses intercepted Iranian ballistic missiles and drones.
You know, they don't have a navy anymore, but they bring out these little Boston whaler fishing boats.
All as we're learning more about Iran's attack on U.S. ships Thursday. Iran launching missiles, drones, and fast boats at these 3 U.S. Navy destroyers.
On May 8, 2026, a South Korean flagged crude carrier, the MV Hana Star, carrying 2.1 million barrels of Saudi light crude, was boarded at gunpoint by IRGC naval units operating under direct command authorization from Tehran. Not intercepted. Not warned. Boarded and seized in international waters. 2 U.S. Navy destroyers attempting a standard freedom of navigation transit that same morning were swarmed by fast attack craft. And a U.S. nuclear submarine, whose designation remains classified, has moved to a position that requires no further explanation. These are just the tip of the iceberg. On the morning of May 8th, the US Gravely and the US Farragut entered the eastern approach to the Strait of Hormuz at 3:40 local time. Before they reached the midpoint of the navigable channel, 12 IRGC Paycap-class fast attack boats closed from 3 separate vectors at speeds exceeding 45 knots. Over Open Channel 16, the internationally monitored maritime emergency frequency, Iranian Naval Command broadcast a message every merchant captain within 80 kilometers could hear. United States warships, you are entering a prohibited zone declared by the Islamic Republic of Iran. Turn back immediately, or face the consequences of your violation. The US Gravely's commanding officer responded with measured clarity, we are transiting international waters under recognized maritime law. We do not comply. The Farragut locked its phalanx close in weapon system, a 20 mm rotary cannon capable of firing 4,500 rounds per minute on the approaching craft. 3 IRGC boats broke off. 2 did not adjust course in time. Both destroyers completed their transit by 0521 without hull damage. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth confirmed the incident within hours and stated plainly, Iran no longer has a navy or a naval commander capable of threatening U.S. freedom of navigation. Behind the statement was something more consequential. Back-channel diplomatic talks mediated through Oman, which had produced quiet understandings as recently as April 28, had produced nothing actionable. Supreme Leader Khamenei's office had rejected every framework offered. The Quds force had spent the previous 6 weeks doing something that made diplomacy irrelevant. Washington already knew what it was. Project Freedom had been authorized. But to understand why Project Freedom exists, you need to understand the weapon Tehran chose, because it is a weapon that, once deployed, does not obey orders. Mine-laying vessels operating mostly at night, using civilian bow cover in some cases, seeded the outer approaches to the Strait of Hormuz with 2 weapon variants. The first is the Sadaf Bottom Influence Mine, an Iranian-manufactured device that rests on the seafloor at depths between 30 and 200 meters. The Sadaf responds to acoustic signatures, magnetic field variations, and water pressure changes generated by passing vessels. Its warhead contains between 130 and 200 kilograms of high explosive, positioned to detonate beneath a ship's keel, the single most structurally devastating point of impact, capable of breaking a 100,000-ton supertanker in half. The second variant is a conventional contact detonation moored mine tethered at depths between 5 and 30 meters, designed to remain invisible to surface radar while drifting at the edge of the navigable corridor. CENTCOM's initial survey, conducted by P-8 Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft and classified satellite assets, confirmed between 140 and 180 deployed devices in known locations. Unconfirmed contacts from sonar sweeps pushed the estimate above 250. The strait at its navigable narrowest offers shipping channels no more than 3 kilometers wide in each direction. At 21 million barrels of daily oil flow, with roughly 18 to 20 large tankers transiting every 24 hours in each direction, the arithmetic of disruption was terrifying. But what made the situation genuinely out of control, even for Tehran, is that the Persian Gulf's tidal and current dynamics had already broken several moored mines from their anchoring chains. These devices were now drifting freely. No satellite, no sonar, no drone could account for all of them simultaneously. Iran had pulled the pin on a grenade inside a room it could not leave. Iranian Naval Command in Bandar Abbas, according to intercepts cited by Reuters on May 7th, had itself issued internal warnings that mine positions were no longer fully reliable. The weapon designed to paralyze the strait was now partially beyond the control of the force that deployed it. This is where asymmetric warfare collides with the reality that the ocean does not take orders from anyone. The United States military does not improvise at this scale. What launched on May 7th was not improvisation. Project Freedom is a phased operational architecture developed inside CENTCOM and signed by Admiral Brad Cooper months in advance of this moment. Phase 1 was aerial dominance, executed before dawn. 12 B-52H Stratofortresses flying from Diego Garcia carried AGM-84L Harpoon Block II missiles, sea-skimming anti-ship weapons with a range of 278 kilometers, and Gabu-39 small-diameter bombs, each weighing 250 pounds with a 110-kilometer standoff range. Their flight path established an aerial denial corridor over every IRGC maritime patrol zone from the strait mouth to the Gulf of Oman. Simultaneously, 2 Ohio-class guided missile submarines repositioned to within Tomahawk cruise missile range of Bandar Abbas, Iran's largest naval base, home to its Kilo-class submarine fleet and its primary fast boat staging area. Neither submarine fired. Neither needed to. Phase 2 addressed the mines directly, using platforms that had never before been deployed in a live mine clearance operation of this magnitude. The Knifefish unmanned undersea vehicle, 6.1 meters long, autonomous, battery-powered, operating at depths up to 300 meters for 16 continuous hours on a single charge, was deployed across both shipping corridors. Its synthetic aperture sonar generates resolution sufficient to distinguish a mine from a rock formation at distances other systems cannot match. Alongside it, MH-53E Sea Dragon helicopters equipped with the AN-AX-24C towed mine-hunting sonar flew at 25 knots across the surface corridors, transmitting mine coordinates in real time to the US Gravely's combat management system. 10 Warthogs from Al Dhafra Air Base, their GAU-8 Avenger cannon delivering 30 Mi depleted uranium rounds at 3,900 per minute, were assigned surface suppression. Within the first 14 hours of Phase 2, 23 IRGC patrol vessels had been destroyed or disabled. 4 Noor anti-ship missile batteries, each capable of engaging targets at 120 to 170 kilometers, had been suppressed through a combination of electronic jamming and direct airstrikes. And the primary eastbound commercial corridor had been swept to 67% mine clearance. Phase 3 brought the alliance structure fully online. The Royal Navy's Queen Elizabeth Carrier Strike Group, which had conducted exercises in the Red Sea throughout late April, repositioned to the Gulf of Oman with its full complement of F-35B Lightning II aircraft, 5th-generation stealth fighters capable of carrying Brimstone anti-armor missiles and Paveway 4 precision-guided bombs in configurations optimized precisely for fast-moving surface targets. French and Italian naval assets confirmed CENTCOM coordination. The UE silently opened Al Dhafra's full ramp capacity to USAF operations without a press conference, a signal that requires no translation in any Gulf capital. By the end of May 8th, the combined coalition controlled every viable ingress and egress point in the Persian Gulf. Approximately 2,800 sailors were operating in the mine clearance corridor alone. Approximately 15,000 U.S. and Allied personnel were forward deployed across the operational theater. 43 commercial vessels, carrying roughly 68 million barrels of crude and refined product in transit, had been either held in anchorage or rerouted pending corridor certification. The sailors aboard those ships, from the Philippines, from India, from Ukraine, from Indonesia, were watching the situation on whatever communications equipment their vessels carried, calculating their own odds in a strait that had not been fully certified safe. General Dan Kane, speaking from the Pentagon, stated, "We have established uncontested maritime corridors through the eastern approach to Hormuz. Commercial navigation will resume under protected escort within 48 hours. The Jibu-72 advanced 5,000-pound penetrator, a bunker-busting bomb capable of penetrating 60 meters of soil or 20 meters of reinforced concrete, had not yet been used. Its presence on the manifest of 4 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers flying continuous orbit patterns over the Arabian Sea was not subtle. Tehran understood precisely what those bombers were holding and why they had not yet released it. Now look beyond the strait itself and follow the shockwave outward, because what happens in 33 kilometers of Persian Gulf waterway does not stay in the Persian Gulf. In the 48 hours following Iran's mine deployment becoming public knowledge, Brent crude crossed $108 per barrel, its highest point since 2022. Rising from $81 just 3 weeks earlier. That is a 33% price spike, compressed into 2 days. Marine war risk insurance premiums, the surcharge underwriters attached to vessels transiting conflict-designated waters, moved from 0.1% of vessel value to 2.7%, a figure that translates to approximately $900,000 in additional cost per voyage for a single Suezmax tanker. For the major Asian import economies, the numbers were immediate and non-negotiable. Japan sources 90% of its crude from the Gulf. South Korea, 70%. Both nations activated strategic petroleum reserve drawdowns within 72 hours of the crisis declaration. South Korea's Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy convened an emergency session on May 8. China, whose government had been quietly building reserve buffer stocks throughout early 2025, was better positioned, but not immune. Beijing's energy ministry issued procurement directives to state oil companies to accelerate spot purchases from non-Gulf sources at whatever premium was required. The Cape of Good Hope alternative routing, bypassing Hormuz entirely by circumnavigating southern Africa, adds 15 days to a Gulf to East Asia voyage. At current fuel, crew, and charter market rates, that adds $2.3 million per voyage. European refineries dependent on Gulf sour crude for their specific refining configurations began activating emergency supply contracts with Norwegian and U.S. exporters, at prices reflecting the sellers' awareness of their sudden indispensability. Downstream from oil, the petrochemical industry registered the disruption first. Naphtha feedstocks for plastics, ethylene for packaging, fertilizer precursors for agricultural supply chains across South Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. These are not abstract economic abstractions. They are the cost of a bag of rice in Lahore, the price of a container ship booking from Mumbai, the inflationary pressure arriving in economies already stretched by 2 years of post-pandemic supply normalization. This is not just about oil. It means a coordinated economic tremor whose aftershocks will be measured in quarterly GDP contractions across 4 continents. Turn your eyes for a moment beyond Iran and look at who is sitting in the quietest corner of this crisis, watching the numbers climb with absolute composure. Russia. Because while the Iraqi bleeds fast boats and missiles into the Persian Gulf, Moscow is running a financial calculation that gets more profitable by the hour. The mechanism is the shadow fleet, between 400 and 600 aging tankers operating outside Western insurance and regulatory frameworks, many sailing under flags of convenience. a significant portion linked through opaque ownership chains to Russian state and semi-state interests. For the past 18 months, this fleet has been positioning itself as the indispensable alternative routing architecture for any disrupted oil flow. Every day, the Strait of Hormuz remains either physically closed or commercially uninsurable. Shipping clients who previously relied on conventional Gulf logistics are making calls to brokers in Dubai, Istanbul, and Hong Kong connected to this network. The Northern Sea Route, the Arctic corridor running along Russia's northern coast, now commercially viable for approximately 5 months annually due to reduced ice cover, is being marketed by Moscow's logistics ministries as the stable long-horizon alternative for Asian energy importers. China, forced by the Hormuz crisis to accelerate diversification, deepens its structural dependency on Russian pipeline oil priced in yuan, settled outside the dollar framework, advancing the de-dollarization architecture that Moscow and Beijing have been building in deliberate layers since 2022. At $108 Brent, every dollar above the $90 threshold adds approximately $170 million per month to Russian oil revenue at current production volumes. The math does not require a genius. But here is where the greatest irony of Iran's strategy begins to emerge from the wreckage. While Tehran believes it is wielding the strait as a weapon against Washington, it is destroying the only economic mechanism that has kept its own regime financially functional. Iran's oil exports, conducted covertly through the same shadow fleet corridors, using ship-to-ship transfers in international waters, flow through or adjacent to the very zone it mined. Kharg Island, handling approximately 90% of Iran's total crude export volume, sits inside the Persian Gulf. With the U.S. Navy now operating an uncontested perimeter, and the IRGC surface fleet reduced to burning hulls, Iran cannot move its own oil. Not to China, not through any channel. The prison it built with its own hands has only one occupant. So here's where the world stands on May 8, 2026. Either Iran's leadership absorbs the full weight of what has happened, a shattered navy, a frozen oil economy, an inflation rate already above 40% and accelerating, a currency in structural collapse, a population watching the cost of bread climb while the IRGC burns through the military hardware their taxes built, and enters negotiations that will cost Tehran every piece of strategic leverage it has constructed across 30 years of patient and expensive regional positioning, or it escalates. Reaches for the Shahab-3 ballistic missile stockpile. Activates Hezbollah's precision rocket inventory pointed at Israeli and Saudi oil infrastructure. Deploys whatever drone arsenals and coastal defense systems survived the first 48 hours of Project Freedom, and transforms what began as a maritime confrontation into a regional war with no ceiling anyone, in Washington, in Riyadh, in Tel Aviv, in Ankara, or in Beijing, can confidently name or credibly contain. The IRGC may believe it still has cards to play. But every card it plays now costs Iran more than it costs its adversaries. The Strait of Hormuz has never been merely a waterway. It has always been the golden lock on the global energy system, the choke point through which a quarter of the world's oil supply passes every single day. Iran spent 2 decades convincing itself it held the only key. Project Freedom just demonstrated, with methodical and fully documented military precision, that the lock can be shattered from the outside and that the cost of shattering it falls entirely on the country that forced that outcome. What do you think? Does Tehran blink and come to the negotiating table before the next phase begins? Or does this crisis escalate into something the Middle East and the global economy cannot walk back from? We are waiting for your comments.